Welcome to Dad Talk Today. The podcast for dads facing some of the toughest moments of their lives. We are here to walk with men through divorce, keep them connected to their kids, help them understand their rights, and work for change in family law courts. Moms, you are always welcome too. We are all about advocating for shared parenting and doing what is best for our kids. Here is your host, Eric Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dad Talk Today. I'm your host, Eric Carroll. I'm joined with Jeff Morgan and Mr. Jeff Younger. In this broadcast, I'm going to be referring to Jeff Morgan as Morgan, since we got two Jeffs, but it's so good to see you fellas. This is a case that we have been following for quite some time now. And I'd say for anybody in the community that's watching this, we really need your help, because I feel like Jeff's case is very important, because if something's not done about this, you're going to start seeing this go on all across the country. And I've already seen more cases are coming to us every day with this issue. And I never knew it would get to this point. But before we get too far into it, Jeff, what's going on, my man?
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. First off, I'd like to say I'm sorry that you're going through this. My heart as a dad grieves right alongside of you. You've had a lot of stuff going on over the past couple of years. Could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and the situation that you're going through?
Well, it really all started when my son was about 2.5. While I was still married, my ex-wife would do crazy things like put my son in timeout and say, the monsters only eat boys. Don't be a boy. And eventually, when he was just around 3 years old, she filed for divorce and used some trickery to kind of push me out of the house. The usual tactics we're all familiar with in divorce. And right after my son's third birthday, he was telling me that mommy's teaching him that he's a girl. And there's a video on YouTube you can get. Just search for "Mommy Says I'm a Girl." And you'll see right there with me for the first time, learning that he believed he was a girl and he believed his mom.
Now, Jeff, what was that like as a father, hearing for the first time that mommy was wanting him to be your girl, or even hearing this, from James? I mean, what was going through your head at that point in time? I'm sure there was a lot of emotions.
Yeah. It's at that point that I realized right then that this divorce was about a lot more than just some small disagreements with stepdaughters. It's at that point that I realized she probably married me just to be a sperm donor that pays child support. It's at that point that I realized I was probably dealing with a high-functioning psychopath or high-functioning sociopath. And it was at that point that I realized she would be willing to do anything to hurt me, and she would be willing to sacrifice the life of this child.
This is so crazy. I mean, it really is, and I think another aspect to your case is it somewhat turned into a political thing. I know a lot of the politicians have gotten involved. I know Ted Cruz stepped in at one point in time. Could you walk us through some of that and, how this kind of progressed through the courts?
Well, I was one of the first cases in the country, and so there's a strategy from the left wing, the radical left wing of the LGBT community, where lesbians would go out and get pregnant, and then they would go into family court and try to advance their agenda, their anti-child agenda, and I think that's kind of what happened to me. But when I got married to Ann Georgelis, she's a pediatrician in Capel. When I married her, many of her friends came to me and told me they were surprised that they thought she was a lesbian. So once I realized the danger to my son, and I realized that it was probably something that was being backed by more than just my ex-wife, I decided that I wasn't going to be quiet about it. And I decided that this was a community problem, that this is child abuse. This is sexual abuse of a child, tampering with a child's sexual identity. I can't think of anything worse. It's right up there with physical rape of a child because it sends them straight towards sexual mutilation and sex change surgeries before the end of puberty. So I decided that it was a community issue and everyone needed to know what was being done to children in their community and what the courts were doing to children in their community. And very predictably, both Democrats and Republicans, libertarians, were outraged by it, horrified and outraged by it. And it wasn't just Ted Cruz, the governor of Texas, the Texas Attorney General. You may know that very recently we just had a Democrat at the federal level introduce legislation outlawing these practices. It's not really a partisan issue. It's an issue of people who see this as child abuse and people who are willing to excuse it as some kind of new form of identity politics.
I'm with you. And, we have a lot of focus on parental alienation, which it seems like you had some of that going on here. Let's walk through that process, though, Jeff, for anyone that wants to know. At 7 years old, this is how I've been told the story. They're wanting to remove his genitals and pump him full of hormones.
Yeah. So starting at, as I said, at 3.5 years old, she began to teach him that he was a girl. She began to cross-dress him immediately at age 3.5. So he was being presented in public as a girl with his fake girl's name. By the time he had reached 5 years old, my resistance to this had gotten more effective, and she started presenting him as a girl at school, dressing him as a girl at school. He goes to school even now as a girl. The courts won't stop it, and even though I have a court order, they won't enforce it. So she took him to a pediatrician, and in a 30-minute consultation, diagnosed him with gender dysphoria, and referred him to a married lesbian gender psychologist in Dallas. She visited that psychologist for 1 hour, and then that psychologist referred my son to the Genesis Clinic to explore, quote, and this is in the medical records, this is a direct quote, to explore the medical side of treatment starting at age 8. And the intention was to put him on puberty blockers at 8 and cross-sex hormones at 10. I took my son to that same gender psychologist. Her name is Rebecca Orr in Oaklawn here in Dallas. Rainbow Counseling is her company. I took my son there. She put 2 sticky notes down on the table in a private session. And she put his fake girl's name and his name, James. And she said, which name do you want to be called? And he said, I want to be called James. So one of the unique aspects of my case that doesn't get a lot of talk is that my son only presents as a girl with his mother. With everyone else, including me, he presents as a boy.
And
why are the courts then privileging this abnormal gender expression with his mom? And why aren't they questioning where that's coming from?
I think, Jeff, it's also important to note now, they tried to silence you on this subject. As the father, they've tried to silence you from talking about this subject as well.
They have. I am currently under a gag order. Well, let's start off during the temporary orders that I was under for 3 years.
Yep.
The court said that during the divorce that I could not refer to my son using male pronouns, that I could not present him to anybody as a boy, that I could not teach him that he was a boy, which prevented me from teaching him traditional Christian doctrine on male and female and sexuality. The best I could do safely was I would read in the book of Genesis up to the creation of man and woman. That's the best I could do. And that lasted for 3 years. I was not able to even teach him that he was a boy. Then after I sort of semi-won my case, I got equal custody, but I didn't get sole possession. I got equal parental rights. I still don't have 50-50 possession. The court issued a gag order, which I'm under now. And the gag order says that I'm not allowed to talk about transgender issues, LGBT issues, whether my son is a boy or girl. I cannot refer to him by his his real name unless it's people that know him as his real name. And I'm not allowed to in any way disparage his treatment by at the hands of my ex-wife. And I've just decided that I have a constitutional right to do those things, that the anti-SLAPP statutes at the federal and Texas and state level in Texas adequately protect my exercise of civil rights, and the courts have no authority to gag me. And I think, the big message I would like to get out is we have to stop following unconstitutional orders from the courts. And I'm just not following them. And I'm inviting the court to hold me in contempt. My lawyer has a writ of habeas corpus prepared. We are ready to go to the Texas Supreme Court and challenge the idea that a family court has the right to tell a father they can't talk about their own children.
And what's crazy, Jeff, is we've tried to post about this even when I knew you was gagged. I said he's got to have a voice, and if they're not going to allow him to talk, we're going to talk. And it's crazy when speaking about this, how many people are actually approving of this going on. So, I mean, I'd like to talk to our audience right here, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, even if you believe in LGBT or what your beliefs are on that. We're talking about a 7-year-old boy. He's 9 now, but 7 years old. No child is in a position to do something like this that is going to affect them for the rest of their lives. We talk about the suicide rates, especially inside of transgender. It's enormous, because once that's done, there's no going back.
You know what's astonishing, and this is one of the real problems we have in family court, is just bad expert information just gets deployed in family courts, right?
Right.
So I'm a working statistician, and at court, all these studies were deployed against me, but the main one that was deployed against me was it was a giant meta study. Retrospective meta study, which as soon as you hear those two words in statistics, you just immediately discount it. You just never, we don't take retrospective studies, and we don't like meta studies. They have to be so carefully tailored. They're almost never done right. And this study, it was huge. It was done throughout the entire Anglosphere, the United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Australia. And they found all of these benefits from these transgender treatments, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and even surgery. Well, I just got the raw data for the study, and I just did a rudimentary descriptive statistical analysis on this. And it was clear that the treatments. So I testified this at court. They had amazing, top endocrinologists saying I was crazy or whatever. 2 months ago, that study was retracted by the APA for the very reasons that I just said, because it actually showed no benefit and actually showed harm to the people. That's consistent with the evidence that my experts presented. I had to hire the top transgender experts in the world, the people that founded the original Johns Hopkins clinic. They shut that clinic down after 4 years because they could prove their treatments were harming patients. So they trained up on my case, and then they testified in the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom courts outlawed the practice on children under 16, right? So we know these treatments, not only do they not help, they harm patients. And that's been well known since the 70s. This is being done for ideological reasons, not medical or psychological reasons.
I got one thing there, Morgan, and I'm going to pass it to you because I know you've been following this case really closely alongside of Jeff. But, there might be people here that's thinking an occurrence like this is rare. Once I started, posting about your case, Jeff, I started getting reached out to from parents all over that this is happening to them as well. This isn't a rare thing. Lots of people are going through this right now. Tell us about some of the people that have reached out to you, Jeff, since this has been going on with you.
Well, you may know Rob Hoogland in Canada. Rob Hoogland is a typical case where children are transitioned secretly without the parents' knowledge. The schools, he's in Vancouver, British Columbia. The schools pushed his child into social transition at school without telling the parents, and then had even begun push the child towards puberty blockers and hormones without telling the parents. When Rob Hoogland found out about this, he began to object to it, and they took his kid away from him for it. Then he started talking about it, and he started naming the names of the doctors who were doing this to the child. And he 3 days ago, he was put in prison in Canada for merely telling people what happened to his child. She's past the point of no return. She's been on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones long enough that she's going to have all of the terrible health effects of this. And that was all done against his wishes, without his consent, and half of it was done without his knowledge by the school. I have another friend in Minnesota. His name is Brent Netz. His child, he lost possession in a divorce, and his wife took advantage of his autistic child, convinced this autistic boy that he was a girl, and got this boy on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones as well. And he's only recently had the money and the wherewithal to, get legal representation that can handle this fight. He's recently gotten 50-50 possession, but he hasn't yet been able to stop the transition of his son. He's filed a lawsuit against the gender clinic because they denied him access to his own child's medical records and refused to communicate with him any aspect of the treatment. So what we have here, and I got to tell you, most of this is being done by moms. In the cases where you see it's being done by fathers, it's because the fathers went transgender and transitioned themselves. That's what you mainly see from the fathers. But most of these children are being transitioned by mothers. And they're using the family court system and the usual biases against fathers to secure their ability to do that against the father's wishes.
Go ahead, Morgan.
Hey, Jeff, one thing that as I'm listening to this again, and as Eric said, I've followed this for quite some time here. Everything is based on a lie. It is based on a lie, and it's supported by a lie. It's propagandized by a lie. It just everything is a lie about the whole thing. But one thing that I've not really heard touched about a whole lot, you were mentioning about teaching your child his gender, his sexual identity, and you got to read through Genesis, but you got to stop at a certain point. And nobody's talked about this as being a religious liberty issue. And I want to talk about that just a little bit because religious liberty is such an important thing in the state of Texas. And has anything been done on this as a religious liberty issue?
Yeah, it's very interesting. We raise the religious liberty issue as the main issue at trial. Mm-hmm. It doesn't appear anywhere in the court's finding of facts. One of the things about Texas, and I think this is true in most states, parental rights actions in the appeals courts have just basically have almost no success.
Right.
Religious rights tests in the appeals courts have lots of success. Mm-hmm. And I think the family court judges go to great lengths to keep any religious, any appealable religious findings out of their rulings, so you can't take them up on appeal. But this was a central issue. I mean, this is something that the family courts have still not resolved, right? What happens if you have two Christians that are married? And I'll take this into another context. They divorce. The mother decides that she wants to raise the children in Islam. And the father decides that he wants to remain Christian. How do we resolve these things?
Right.
We have no answer on how to resolve these things. Right. So here we have a case where we're all Orthodox Christians. My children are baptized Orthodox Christians. Transgender ideology in its complete entirety violates the doctrines of Orthodox Christianity. Mm-hmm. My wife leaves me, takes my children, and now she can change their religion, take them to some liberal Methodist church or some liberal Lutheran church, and with completely different religious doctrines, in order to justify, castrating my son at 10 years old. This is something that courts just haven't figured out how to deal with, and frankly, as a society, we haven't either.
Yeah, and you're talking about Anne leaving you, but really, this was not a divorce that you went through. This was an annulment instead. Yeah, can you explain the difference in the procedure, both in the prenuptial that you signed, because there was some misinformation put out about that I found a bit disingenuous and a bit maddening that it was not really discussed more. But if you could discuss that part first, and maybe even if you want to touch a little bit about the religious aspect of your marriage and why the state should even have been able to do anything with your marriage whatsoever, like annul it as it did. I'd love to hear you talk about that, because this too was a religious liberty issue.
Yeah, so one of the remarkable things about my case, I've showed the court filings to probably 200 or 300 lawyers. Mm-hmm. And all of them fall out of their chair when they see that my marriage was annulled. Mm-hmm. I had an airtight prenuptial agreement.
So you thought?
Yeah, and that prenuptial agreement, we had it reviewed by lawyers before the marriage. We had it reviewed 6 months after the marriage. It was signed, everything. In that prenuptial agreement, we revealed all of our real property, all of our financial properties like stock equities, things like that, investment accounts, all of our cash, everything that we'd invested, our entire financial life was exposed to each other in the prenuptial agreement. In addition, we each gave each other our social security numbers, our driver's license number, and an address history for the last 7 years in order so that we could both run background and credit checks on each other. Okay? So what the judge concluded in my case was that I had misled Miss Georgioulis about how much money I made before the marriage. And that on that basis, they annulled the marriage.
Wow. Go ahead. I think you probably want more to say about that whole thing, but I'm
just pausing for effect. Think about what I just said. I know. I have an annulment document where we signed by both parties and both of their attorneys, showing that we had released to everyone our complete financial situation, all real property, everything. And they found that I had defrauded her and lied to her about my financial situation. The other thing that was just amazing about that was the whole purpose of it was because I had sold my truck to pay for legal expenses. I had sold an F-250 Super Duty. And I took the $40,000 and gave it to my lawyer. The whole purpose of that exercise by the judge was to make me pay that back to her. Now, the way we bought this truck is I gave her the cash and we ran it through her business. And I was a consultant, a marketing consultant on her business. I doubled the number of patients in her practice. And so I paid for the truck. Then Anne was paid for the truck with a business deduction. And then she was paid for the truck again when she won the judgment against me at court. So she was paid for this truck 3 times. But the whole purpose was for the judge to stick me with the money for selling that truck. And she needed to break the prenup in order to do that. And so she did.
Was that Judge? Go ahead.
That was Judge Kim Cook's 255th District Court in Dallas, Texas. The other thing that was interesting is I filed for findings of fact and conclusions of law. Opposing counsel wrote up trial findings of fact and conclusions of law, and the judge just signed them. So there's 130 of these findings. One of them was that I will do and say anything to get my way. That was actually a finding of the court. The court could tell in the future what I would know and do and say.
Well, the opinion became a fact.
Correct. So, and so what they did is they annulled this marriage in order to break the prenup. Here's the problem. In the process of annulling the marriage, that means that there was never a marriage. There was never a marriage.
Right. Which means that your children.
My children are illegitimate. And that has big implications in the Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
I have not been able to take communion in the Orthodox Church, for example, because of that. So by one signature of a judge, my children went from born in a marriage to illegitimate, born outside of a marriage.
Do you think that most religious leaders understand how important the issue of annulment, which very rarely happens, and divorce actually is to our religious liberties? I mean, what you're saying, this is something that is horrifying.
It is.
That an individual can cancel an entire denomination, religious, whatever you want to call it, doctrine based on a signature, based on my opinion, which I claim to be a conclusion of fact, and or whatever. I just don't really know, on my whim. I don't like your religion.
Yeah, there's an interest. This is interesting because we have a complete disconnect between what used to be our cultural understanding of what marriage is and what the legal understanding of what marriage is. And we are still clinging to the previous cultural understanding of what marriage is because that previous cultural understanding was right and proper for the development of children and the safety of children. But with the advent of no-fault divorce, you have a new kind of legal regime around marriage. And then you have the punitive Title IV-D laws which incentivize removing the father and create incentives to, in fact, destroy the father financially. You have a system in which men are completely disincentivized from entering into marriage and are completely disincentivized from remaining part of their children's lives. It's cost me close to $1 million just to remain a part of my children's lives 27% of the time. It's cost me almost $1 million. So, you think about a society that would do that to fathers, and you have a society that doesn't care anything about children. It cares nothing about children. The legal regime that's regulating marriage has got to be reformed, or marriage is just as an institution is simply going to go away.
So when you say the society or the government cares nothing about children, there is a very interesting section of our Texas Family Code. You're probably familiar with it, 201-107C, that says that the judge should make a ruling in such a manner so as to maximize Title IV-D funds to the state.
That's
so
right.
Basically, the state's interest in children, from what I hear you saying, is how do we profit from them?
That's right. There's two issues here, and I think I'm going to start with a slightly different issue, but I think it's also very important. We have statutes which say judges should always rule in the best interest of the children. They should always, in fact, it says they should act in the best interest of the children. Here's the problem. The best interests of a child are not objective, right? The best interests of a child for a Catholic are probably quite different than they are for a Baptist. The best interest of a child of an atheist is probably very different than the best interest of a child for a Muslim. The best interest of a child for a New Yorker, I can absolutely guarantee you, are very different than the best interests of the child considered from the point of view of a Texan father. Right? I think every child should know how to use a long gun, a short gun, a long blade, and a short blade, and ought to know how to hunt, ride, and shoot, and fight. Right. Now, that's probably very different than somebody from New England. Okay? So this idea that there is an objective standard for the best interest of the child is incorrect. The reason the court likes to appeal to that standard is because it allows the court to substitute its own view of what the best interests of the child are for the parents, right? And conveniently, that view always seems to line up with maximizing Title IV-D reimbursements from the federal government. Very conveniently. And that might have something to do with the fact that judicial retirements are funded from those reimbursements. The more child support a judge assigns, the bigger their retirement. They have a pecuniary interest in ensuring that parents don't have equal custody. If they have equal custody, no one will pay child support, and the state loses a lot of money. I'll give you an example. In Texas, it's $750 million. The entire Texas Attorney General's office is funded by Title IV-D reimbursements, to the point where we have statutory courts called they're actually called Title IV-D courts.
Yeah, I've seen
family courts. They're actually called Title IV-D courts. And they're just courts specifically for the Office of the Attorney General to put men in jail so they can get reimbursements.
Yeah.
I went down to one of these courts in Dallas County, and I talked to one of the lawyers, and the lawyer told me this is horrible. He said the state doesn't actually care if they put you in jail when you don't pay the child support, because if you're not paying the child support, they'll put you in jail, and then you go on the federal reimbursement program for prisoners.
So they make more money.
Yeah, so you can either pay your child support if you can, although I encourage people just to do the math on the formulas we have here in Texas. Just do the math on 30% of your gross income, a father who makes $40,000 a year, and you'll see that it's impossible for him to find a place to live on that amount of money. You can't live on that amount of money. So the child support formulas are broken, and you have judges who are acting as though they control the child's best interests. And that's really a central argument with what I have going on right now. I can't get 50-50 custody until the counselors clear me on 9 points of counseling, stuff like, unconditionally loving your child, bullying. As soon as I'm cleared on that with counselors, I get 50-50 custody and no child support. And by the way, I pay maximal child support. I pay well over $40,000 a year. So I can't get the counselors to see my son as a boy. They only want to see my son as a girl. The court-appointed counselors have refused to see my son when he's dressed as a boy. They have also affirmed that he is a girl without my consent. So I denied them the right to see my child. They have done all this despite the fact that I have a court order, which is adjudicated twice, by the way, that my son is male by sex, a boy by gender, and his name is James Damon Younger. And the court-ordered counselors are still teaching him that he's a girl.
This is incredible.
So now that I have revoked the court-ordered counseling, now my ex is saying that I'm endangering the children, and on the 29th, we're having a hearing to take my parental rights.
So, Jeff, this whole counseling regime that you're talking about, you're footing the bill for that too, aren't you?
It's a $4,000 a month counseling regime.
And you don't have it, from what I hear you saying, you don't really have much say or input either in the choice of a counselor or telling the counselor back off, you're being abusive. You're basically paying for the court counselor to abuse your children. That's the way that I would say it. I don't know if that's if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, I mean, one of the remarkable facts about my case is in all of the 6 years of solid litigation that I've been engaged in, been sued without break for 6 years. The court has never allowed me to get an independent second opinion for my son.
Wow.
The court is strictly controlling what psychologists see my son so they can get the opinions that they want.
So, Jeff, and Eric, I know you probably have some more questions here, but let me go ahead. Let me ask this question too, because, Ann is a pediatrician, made a lot of money, I'm sure, decent money anyway, as a pediatrician. And I'm kind of wondering in the back of my mind, you mentioned $40,000, but I'm sure that Ann made, maybe 10 times that amount. Who knows? I don't know. It's none of my business. But as a doctor, I'm sure she made, somewhere well into the six figures, and you're paying her child support. And there's something that's a disconnect to me. Are you paying her child support, or are you paying her money to keep suing you? I mean, it does not appear to me that you're actually, this child support is the name of this money that they're extorting or stealing from you on threats of who knows what if you don't pay it. It's called child support, but I don't see that it's really being used for that purpose. This is my perspective. I may be incorrect.
There's absolutely in Texas, there's absolutely no legal requirement that child support be spent on the children. Child support is owed to the mother, not to the children. The mother doesn't have to account for how the money's spent. She can use it for whatever she wants.
Okay. So the Kuntz Fuller Law Firm. I guess I'll mention them by name because I have a friend who also was involved with them, and I'm going to give my opinion. So this is not Jeff Younger's opinion, or if it is, he can be silent about it, but this is my opinion. My opinion of the Kuntz Fuller Law Firm is that it has questionable ethics. I do not agree with some of the stuff that I've seen them do. I think that they have been abusive to parents. I've watched the Kuntz Fuller Law team, because it was not just a single attorney, on behalf of Anne operate. I thought they were dirty. They smeared, they muddied the issue, and then they tried to make something about who would act in the best interest of the child and tried to portray you in a negative light when what they completely avoided the abuse issue. And I remember looking at the Kuntz Fuller Law Firm ad, which they have changed since then. They used to say, there's two sides to every story. You want Kuntz Fuller on your side. They didn't say, tell us your story. If you're on the right side, we'll be on your side. It basically appeared to me that Kuntz Fuller was prostituting themselves in a way for whoever would pay them the most money. And so this is my thought process, and I don't care if you agree with it or disagree with it or whatever. But to me, it seems, okay, here's Anne. She is a doctor, pediatrician. She's making good money. She is wanting to sue you and everything. She's got the ability to hire the most expensive, I would say, based on what I've seen, the somewhat questionably ethically challenged law firm of Kuntz Fuller, to do whatever they need to take you down as a father to help her abuse this child. Something seems to be wrong with this whole scenario, that they should be allowed to do that. And yet I also believe too that Kuntz Fuller, is, from what I've heard other people say, and I don't know them personally, only a couple of individuals, but they seem to be a very big law firm, an influential law firm. I don't know if they do a judge shopping or anything like that, but they seem to have people in places, or they've appeared at times to perhaps even buy people, from what I've been told. What do you have to say about the attorney profession and the ability of the attorney profession and the law firms to police themselves?
First of all, I have great respect for attorneys. I think attorneys do a lot of good work and are vital. Philosophically, I say philosophically because what I'm about to say has absolutely no practical use, but it is important to note that we have created a legal system for citizens of the United States that is not accessible to citizens of the United States.
That's true.
It is only accessible to experts. Whenever you hear something lawyer, a lawyer is just the legal term for an expert in the law. Attorney is someone who represents you. The system is only accessible by experts, and judges will freely tell you that, right? They'll freely tell you that pro se litigants don't know how to offer evidence and address. That's because it's incredibly arcane how to offer evidence. The hearsay rules alone are incredibly arcane. People have to go through 5 years of schooling just to understand these things, right?
The sacred rituals of the law.
Yeah. But we have created this system of law that is not accessible to us. Okay, so you have to pay to access the system, and you have to pay a lot of money. When we grant any license, when the state of Texas grants a bar license, really any license, psychology license, any license, there is a statutorily empowered board, and with lawyers they call it the bar, right? The putative purpose of the bar in the statutes is to preserve the ethics of the legal profession and to serve the interests of justice for the citizens. The only reason we give licenses is for public goods. There's no reason to have a license if it isn't for some public good. But what happens with all of these, just same thing happens with agencies, but it happens with professional bodies. They all become co-opted by moneyed special interests. So you find this situation with lawyers facing judges that they want to maintain good relationships with judges. So they don't make certain arguments that might be effective for their clients because they're afraid those arguments might offend the judge. They don't want to go on appeal against the judge because they're afraid the judge will hold it against them. And these judges are jackasses and will hold it against them. You can guarantee it. We've got a judge right here near me with a friend of me and Jeff Morgan's, a judge who has violated literally every precedent of family law and every canon of judicial ethics to keep a father from seeing his son. And this is just because this father attempted to remove the case to federal court and the judge got pissed off at him.
Yep.
So judges are jackasses and they have thin skins and they're imperious and they will hold this stuff against you. So the lawyers aren't wrong about that. And they don't want to tempt these judges and get these judges upset with them. So they harm their clients by not making effective arguments that might piss off the judges. I feel like in many cases in my divorce, not with my current lawyer, but in my divorce, this happened a lot. One of the things in my divorce case is the custody evaluator just perjured himself, just straight up perjured himself.
Yeah.
The difference was I could prove that he did. He said that I had made a false allegation that Ann Georgelis was tampering with the gender identity of my son at 3 years old. Well, I showed him that video that's on YouTube. I showed it to him. Where my son's saying, Mommy says I'm a girl. Mommy puts me in dresses. Mommy paints my nails. Mommy teaches me that I have a girl's brain and a boy's body. Right? I showed him that video. That video never appeared in his report. And he actually recommended that I get reduced custody time because I made a false allegation against her saying that she tampered with my son's gender identity. Now, this guy just went in there and just straight up lied. His name is Blake Mitchell, and he's a custody evaluator in Dallas, Denton, and Collin counties, and he lives in Frisco, Texas. And he is a complete liar. And the judge, faced with this, had to throw out his report. So I got his report struck. But she still allowed him to testify to his observations about me with my son. It's just amazing the sort of level of corruption in family court. My current lawyer, Logan O'Neill, has this joke. He says, he had a friend who was a corporate lawyer who asked him, what's family law like? I do corporate law. What's family law like? And Logan said, it's just like corporate law. We just don't follow the Constitution. And that about sums up family court for you.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, I know that Eric's got a couple of things he wants to say here, but one question that I wanted to ask, simply because I saw a comment, maybe I misread the comment, but I thought somebody just accused you of bigotry against the LGBT.
They did. I was shocked it took the opposition that long to show up, but we knew it was coming. I'll touch on that afterwards, but yeah.
Right. But I wanted Jeff to actually address that issue because I was with them last night with another panel. And Jeff, you've got a perspective on that would kind of blow that whole myth out of the water. Could you tell us about your time in the military and what happened there?
So this came up in trial too. That they said that I lied about my military service to her. Look, I was crazy when I was a young man, and I was a very aggressive Type A personality, and so I forged my birth certificate when I was 15 and joined the Marine Corps underage. So I got caught in a security check when I was 16, and they discharged me and sent me to Houston. I went to high school, worked my way through high school. They wouldn't take me until I was 24 because they wanted me to go to college and then come back. So I joined the Army when I was 18. I went through the Army Infantry School, went through the Airborne School Ranger Indoctrination Program, came back to the Airborne School. And while I was there was a gay cook, a guy I didn't even know. I mean, he had served me, potatoes in the mess hall. I didn't know the guy. But they discharged him for being gay, and they gave him a dishonorable discharge. Now, dishonorable discharges are way worse than even having a federal felony conviction. Like, you're permanently ineligible with a dishonorable discharge. You're permanently ineligible for everything. I don't even think you can get Social Security once you've had a dishonorable discharge. It was reserved for cowardice in battle that resulted in the death of friendlies. Okay. It was reserved for this very specific situation. They could have given that guy a general discharge. You know, if they didn't want to give him an honorable discharge, give him a general discharge. So I led a protest across the street from the base at Fort Benning, Georgia, and I led a protest against them doing this to this guy. And at one point, I crossed the street and got on the sidewalk on base. And on that basis, they later arrested me and charged me with, and I'm not kidding, consorting with homosexuals, and put me in jail for that. And then they gave me an honorable discharge and said, you know, we don't want your kind here, that kind of thing. So when, so any of you who are in the audience, you know, you're listening now and you're posting things to Eric Carroll like we're anti-LGBT. Have you gone to jail, punk? You gone to jail for gay rights? Listen, punk, if you haven't gone to jail for gay rights, don't come talking to me about it, buddy. I'll put my ass on the line for gay rights. You can go to hell.
Well, I think that was pretty clear.
Well, you know, tell us how you really feel, Jeff.
Absolutely.
I get a little
hey, man, sometimes you just got to get that across, and there's people that don't really realize what it's like to be in your shoes and hear these stories, and that's why, you know, we wanted to make sure that we came on here and cleared some of that up.
It's always some white far left. It's not even liberals. You know, I have lots of friends who are liberals. I'm talking about far left, some skinny far left punk with concerned glasses who thinks, you know, spouting off all this stuff about identity politics is really helping the cause of gay rights. You know, go out and take a few punches for it, buddy, and then come talk to me.
Yeah, and this is not a gay issue. It's talking about the abuse, the mutilation of a young child. And what I found was this. I don't know if you remember, you know, when I was there at your trial, there was a transgender person that I met there. And this person was saying, you know, I've always known that I was a woman. And the person was now in his or her 20s. But said, dear God, don't do this to an 8-year-old child. This is abusive. So I was wondering, I mean, by and large, when you look at the lesbian and the gay community, are they as outraged about this as most people are? I mean, I understand that there's always the fringe.
They are. So, you know, when they do polls of the gay community, they find a good solid 50% are against transitional minors. They find a good 50% of Democrats are against the transition of minors. They find that a good solid 60% of feminists are against the transition. The radical feminists, you know, let me tell you something, man. Some of the best, you're talking to a guy, look, I'm about as right wing. If I met Attila, I'm so far right wing. If I met Attila the Hun, I think he was a little liberal, but I could probably get along with him. I am so far on the right, you wouldn't even believe it if I told you how far on the right. Okay? The absolute best defenders for my son have been radical feminists.
Wow. That's something that we've never heard.
This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue that it basically cuts the line in America between those people that believe that children have to be protected from politics of all kinds, from sexual forces and sexual propaganda, pornography, all kinds of things. There's a group of people that think children should not be exposed to that, and I call those people, you know, people who want like the traditional family, and there are people who don't.
Right.
Okay. And unfortunately, that line crossed right through my family and right between my son's legs.
Yeah. So Jeff, you know, you were just talking about the feminists, the radical feminists that are great supporters of you, but yet I'm going to ask a question and I'm going to let you respond to it. I believe it was in Idaho, there was a Republican legislature that had a bill come before them kind of banning this transgender stuff. Now, if I'm incorrect in the details, let me know. But they did not get it passed. And I mean, we have a Republican state here in Texas, and that so far this hasn't been passed. I mean, maybe this term will be different. But why is it happening that sometimes in areas that you think, you know, the Republicans are fighting for the family, it's not being passed? Does the question make sense? And do I have my facts accurate on that?
Yeah, I mean, the Idaho government is controlled in all three branches by Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
The House in Idaho passed a bill out, and this is an uncontroversial bill. This is a bill that all it did was outlaw sex change surgeries on minors. It didn't even outlaw hormones. It just outlawed, cutting the testicles off minors. That's it. That's all it did.
Or mastectomy.
Totally uncontroversial. Nothing controversial about that. Then it went to the Senate, and Senate Republicans voted it down. Never made it to the governor. So I did an investigation. I went up there. I found it there. I went up there and investigated this. I talked to journalists. I talked to the senators that voted for it, but senators voted against it. Talked to the Speaker of the House. And so here's what happened. The left is just it's not really the left. It's the transgender activists on the left are so sophisticated in pushing this. They build these gender clinics, and what they do is they get local banks in all the key voting districts of Idaho on the hook for this gender clinic. So this gender clinic owes this money back to all these banks. So when it comes up in the Senate, you get the Chamber of Commerce coming out and all these big donors coming out saying, don't endanger my loans. That's how it was defeated. They're playing the game at a whole different level. And here's the other thing I don't think a lot of people know. There's an excellent article that you can get at the Federalist called "Who Are the Rich White Men Funding the Transgender Movement?"
Really? Okay. Say that again.
Who are the rich white men funding the transgender movement? And what you will find is that it's Republicans funding it. Peter Singer, major hedge fund owner, is a huge funder of the transgender movement. A guy named Pritzker, who's a cross-dresser, is also a major funder. He's a billionaire.
He's not in Chicago, is he in Illinois?
Yes, he's the brother of the governor in Illinois.
Okay, got it.
And they wash their money through Australian non-governmental organizations that then wash back into the United States. That's how they've been laundering their money on this. And the effect in Australia has been dramatic because it's pushed this agenda as well in Australia. But there's 2 points I would like to make about this. One is the huge amount of money. Someone in the audience mentioned Big Pharma. The drug that they use to do puberty blockers on kids is called Lupron. Lupron is the most expensive drug sold in the United States. When a child goes on to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, they can't go off of them without severe consequences, severe medical and psychological consequences. Those children become, on average, a $4.5 million lifetime income stream to the gender clinic.
Holy cow.
And the leaders of these big pharma companies are 100% with these big hedge fund guys that I just mentioned in pushing the trans agenda. And they're using the profits from the sale of Lupron to push even more children into Lupron. It's the same thing that was done with fentanyl that we now have CEOs in jail for. They were using the profits from fentanyl to market more fentanyl and get more people addicted to it. That's the exact model that Big Pharma is using on kids right now.
You know, Jeff, it was crazy when we started talking about this, the amount of opposition. I've even had people that came and told me, if you start talking about this case, we're just going to completely stop supporting you or anything you did. It's just like, that's fine. Get on somewhere. I'm standing for what we believe in. And you're talking about a little child that this is about to happen to. And it just pisses me off so bad. But just seeing some of the opposition off the little bit that we've reported on it, what's some of the opposition that you've seen and some of the things that came at you for being involved in this?
Oh my goodness. So I'll just give you. I recently gave a speech here in Flower Mound where I live, and first of all, we had a local activist, trans activist. Come after me and made all kinds of defamatory allegations against me on Facebook in an attempt to, besmirch my reputation. That stuff doesn't work on me anymore because once you've been through a messy public divorce, one of the good things about it is it has the character of a public Christian confession. So everything bad about me, you guys already know, and I can tell you still love me. So I don't. She can say whatever she wants. That stuff doesn't bother me anymore. I can actually see why the ancient Christians advocated public confession, because it's completely and totally liberating. You just don't worry about shame anymore. It just doesn't bother you. Then they tried to shut down the event by calling the health inspector, saying we were COVID risks because we're a bunch of people who were opposed to wearing masks, the crazy right-wingers who don't want to wear masks. So we had special restrictions imposed on us. I've had people appear at talks that I do that heckle me. I've had on occasion death threats. Probably the most amusing one was one where a couple of Antifa guys in Dallas decided that it was going to be fun to punch me in the chest and shoulders. And so, I just took off my glasses and headbutted one of them. And that sort of ended that. But they've tried every dirty trick you can think of, just every single dirty trick.
Yeah. That is nuts. I can't imagine what that's like. I just really can't. Go ahead, man.
There was something that I was, I go to a bunch of town halls when I can, open forums or whatever. And so one of the legislators who actually, because when I first started to hear about this, this whole situation, I thought this has got to be something that I don't know. It's got to not be true, right? But there was a Texas state representative, House Representative Matt Rinaldi. And I saw that Matt Rinaldi signed something that said, okay, this is true. And I'm like, well, if Matt Rinaldi signed it, it's not going to be a lie. I mean, I trust this guy 100%, but I was still having all these questions and so on. So anyway, Matt Rinaldi lost his election against Julie Johnson. And I thought, well, she's having a town hall. And I decided to go up there and I started to videotape like I normally do. And during the course of something, she made a comment to Luna. And everybody started laughing and chuckling. And I said, did I just hear what I heard? Because I found out afterwards that, Representative Johnson is also involved in a relationship with another person who was not a male. And so she seemed to be favorable toward and the idea of James transitioning over. But I was shocked. So when you said what is some of the opposition, some of the legislators are opposing it. And I remember go ahead.
No, go ahead. Julie Johnson is a personal friend of Ann George.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that, but I was.
Yeah. And they're using a carefully crafted message to stop legislation. And this message is specifically designed to appeal to a conservative's desire for limited government, because in Texas, Republicans control the government. So what they say is, we don't want the government to interfere in a personal family decision like this. So I always ask people who are on the trans side of this issue, like, suppose that, a mother and father were tattooing swastikas on a child's face.
Which,
I can guarantee you CPS would take that child away instantly. Like it would like take one look and then there would be a take. That'd be it, right?
Yeah.
Tattoos don't have any permanent physical harm to you. With significant effort and pain, they can even kind of be removed. But they're saying that they can cut the genitals off children. They're saying they can do that. And what's interesting is that Texas, 3 sessions ago, passed a female genital mutilation law and outlawed female genital mutilation.
Yep, they did.
So and yet young girls are going to these gender clinics and are being mutilated.
Right. Jeff, a lot of this focus has been on what's going on with James, but you got another son, and that's been there and has seen a lot of this going on. How has this affected Jude?
So look, you got to kind of, to answer that question, you kind of got to understand my sons and how different they are. Uniquely little men. What's the best way to describe this? Okay, so when they were little, I didn't understand the new cartoons. I don't know if it's just an age thing, but I just literally don't understand what's going on in the new cartoons. So I went and got the old Johnny Quest cartoons, from the 1960s, where they actually shoot guns and stuff like that.
Right, yeah, I love them.
So we would watch Johnny Quest a lot, when we were young in the morning, right? And they cook them some eggs, and we watch Johnny Quest. So, James would say like, "Oh, look, he's running away from the monster. Look, he's fighting. He's shooting that gun." And Jude would say things like, "Oh my gosh, he's scared. He's afraid the dog's going to be hurt." So James was living the outer life of the characters, and Jude was living the inner life of the characters, right? So that should give you some sense of what the temperament of my sons are. Jude's struggling with a couple things. He's a very sincere believer in God. He believes in the 10 Commandments, and he earnestly and sincerely tries to follow the commandments. He's struggling with when is it appropriate for him to lie, because he knows that his brother's not a girl. I'll just give you an example. After the first freeze here, in Texas, we can go hunt rabbits. So we had a freeze. I went out to hunt rabbits. But when I was a boy, I hunted them with Apache throwing sticks. So I've been teaching my boys how to hunt with throwing sticks. Stock up on rabbits. We take them out with sticks, and then we eat them. So we were out by the creek. We were muddy and dirty and, full of who knows what. So we stripped down. We're all going to jump in the shower, get cleaned up before dinner. Jude just points down at James's crotch and says, "Well, he's not a girl." And I'm like, yeah, he's not a girl. He knows he's not a girl. So, but he also knows that he's not supposed to lie. He's not supposed to bear false witness against his brother. And yet at his mom's house, he has to do that or be severely punished. And so he's trying to grapple with the idea that there is a Christian morality, but apparently he's not supposed to follow it. It's a tremendous undermining of the moral education of Jude. Tremendous undermining of his moral education.
Well, another question I would have about this, Jeff, this has been a very public case. James has been sent to school in a dress. They're calling him Luna. One day he's as a boy, one day he's as a girl. What have they told you anything like what their classmates are coming back and saying? This is going to be very confusing for the classmates as well. Everybody knows about it. What's some of the blowback that you've seen from that?
Well, they're in third grade. I don't know that their classmates know about any of the publicity, but I do think the parents do.
Right.
One of the astonishing things, and this is a real commentary on where we are in America right now. Most of the parents agree with me, but don't want to make any waves at the school because they're afraid it might hurt their kids' grades. I've been told that repeatedly. So we're in a point in America where people will not do the right thing. When it's easy to do the right thing, they won't do it. If there's any minor inconvenience, a threat to their reputation, a threat to some embarrassment, they won't do the right thing. That was the big lesson for my jury trial. You presented with all this evidence. I even showed an email where she contemplates cutting my son's penis off. And the jury still wouldn't give me primary custody. I mean, it just shows you can't depend on juries. You can't depend on people to do the right thing anymore. That's a testament to something that I don't think we talk a lot about. If you think about how powerful this transgender lobby is, it's the same kind of techniques that are deployed against the equal share parenting people. They are very skilled at propaganda and misdirection. Yeah. And let's just think about how powerful they are, right? Let's imagine like the worst totalitarian society you could ever possibly imagine. Think like North Korea, some 1984 level society, right? You probably could torture someone or threaten them into looking at their son and saying, okay, that's a girl, right? But I don't think you could actually get them to believe it. Mm-hmm. With their propaganda techniques and their social coercion techniques, they've got 40% of the country actually believing this nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to do it from 2015 to 2020. We're talking 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. It took them 15 years to get gay marriage, right? And then 5 years with the transgender issues. They have immense social power. They're exerting immense social power. And that's why you don't have equal shared parenting. That's why you'll never get Title IV-D reform using conventional political techniques. They are just that powerful.
So when you talk about not being able to get these goals or get these changes made using conventional techniques, what do you have an alternative? Because one of the things I'll admit with you that fathers should be the supermen who are fighting back. We are the protectors. We should be taught to be warriors for our families and the right things. And yet too often, the ideal male is an emasculated male. I mean, you look at the clothing that they put out, this is the new male clothing or whatever. You're like, it just sickens me to see that that's how a male is being portrayed. But regardless of that part, we are not effective right now. What do we need to do to become more effective? Or is this something that, to be honest with you, I mean, there's times that I think, okay, you know what? We need to go underground. We need to infiltrate. I mean, I have my own thoughts about this stuff. And I'm not talking about anything illegal, but I'm talking about we need to organize as a community. But you've thought about this, I'm sure, too, because you've dealt with this head on. So what are your thoughts that you can share publicly with us?
So my point of view is based on direct observation of successes and failures. So the very first success I ever saw against the media establishment was something called Gamergate. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not.
So what happened was a bunch of game journalists decided that video games needed to be more female friendly, and that they needed to change how they designed video games and remove a lot of the elements that, frankly, video gamers really like. Okay. Well, these are kind of like Aspergery video game players. And one of the things that came out of the Gamergate is, brother, don't piss off a bunch of Aspergery people because they will own your ass. They went out and got all kinds of evidence of pay to play in the game journalism community, very illegal. People lost their jobs. People that were sleeping with journalists to get good reviews, all kinds of just horrible stuff. And when you look at what these Gamergate people did, it was very simple. There was never a leader. Whenever the journalists would attack Gamergate, they would say, oh, so you're the leader of Gamergate. And what they like to do is they like to set up a leader, right? Somebody that's at the top, and then they find some problem for them and they knock them down, right? So they want to make one person the emblem of the movement, and by discrediting the person, they discredit the movement.
Right.
So everybody in Gamergate just said, well, there's no leader. I'm just a video gamer. I'm just a concerned video gamer. There's no leader.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So the first principle has to be there's no leaders. You're not in charge of anybody and nobody's in charge of you.
Yeah.
And when one of the problems we have in this sort of fathers' rights movement and the equal shared parenting movement, and the movement, to save children from this stuff, is that everybody wants to start their own organization and build up some kind of big organization. Why? We have great organization. There's no better talk show on this issue than Dad Talk Today. Why start another one? How about we make Dad Talk Today worldwide, global, make it the one, right? Well, you reinforce success, not failure. We have a success, reinforce it, right? Go do something else where we need help, right? And Dad Talk Today, support people doing other things. You see what I mean?
Right.
Everybody wants to be a leader. So we got to stop doing that. When people ask me, Jeff, are you, and I've been asked this by journalists, are you the leader of a movement against transgender? No, I'm just a concerned dad standing up for his kid. That's all I am.
Right.
Nothing more than that. And now they can't discredit the movement. They can't discredit it. That's the first thing. Second thing they did is they used swarming tactics. Whenever there was a need for a bunch of people to be somewhere, they went. Mostly that was online, right? And they had the means to communicate with one another to swarm on a target when necessary. Third, they had a secure communication infrastructure. They had a highly encrypted, very secure communication infrastructure only between trusted sources that nobody could break into. How do you keep trusted sources? You don't have more than 5 people you talk to about this stuff. These are people that you go down at the pub and drink with that you've known for 20 years. You don't talk to everybody. The first rule, this is one, we can paraphrase this from Fight Club. The first rule of political organizing against these well-funded activists is there is no movement, there is no organization against these activists, right? You remember the Fight Club? First rule of Fight Club is there's no Fight Club, right? There's no such thing. I'm just hanging out with my beer buddies, right? And sometimes my beer buddies cooperate with other groups of beer buddies. And there's no way for them to counter that or counter propagandize that. You're talking about people who are, look, these are people who have subverted entire government agencies. They have subverted the military now is doing sex change surgeries for their military. These are people who have subverted entire state governments. You don't think they can subvert your little 50-50 shared parenting organization, brother? Oh, come on, let's get real. The only way to be safe is to not have such an organization and to keep everything small, informal. And when we have successes like Dad Talk Today, we support it. We swarm on Dad Talk. We should have swarms of people coming in here, right? And we should be doing the same for each other. If somebody says, "Hey, I've got a judge here," why can't we get 200 people to court watch?
Right.
I've never understood that, man. It's so fractured. And even like when we very first started Dad Talk, I had a lot of the organizations that came here, and I didn't know who anybody was when I started this. I had no idea. And everybody, introduced themselves, and I tried to help every organization out there.
Sure.
And it's nuts. It is nuts what's went on. And people say, why aren't you unifying with this person or this person or this person? Because there is more drama in politics inside of this movement than there is with the opposition. And that is such a shame, because until we organize, nothing's going to get done. And we're kicking off next month. We're going to be going all over the country. And my plan is to identify the local leaders, give them a platform like we're doing right now, and show what they are doing. Not about Dad Talk. Let's show what they're doing with these shared parenting bills. What's going on over there? I would want nothing more, Jeff, that when this goes to trial, I want Dad Talk Today standing outside of the courthouse saying, we're going to save James. And that's how you organize, and that's how you get your voice out there. Yeah. But I appreciate you saying that, because we put up with a lot, and I want to work with everybody, but it's everybody wants to start their own podcast and want to start all these other efforts, and
sure,
we're never going to get anywhere like that.
Yeah, I'm like, look, let 1,000 flowers bloom, right? You want to have your podcast, do something different than Dad Talk Today, right? We have that. Right. So that's a solved problem. Do something different. I've thought about, for example, building a kind of podcast or video course on how do you organize in small groups. It seems like that's needed. Maybe somebody else would do that better than me. If somebody else was doing it, I wouldn't do it. I don't need to do it, right? The other thing is about Gamergate is they were absolutely relentless. I mean, they were absolutely and totally relentless. And
they would never quit.
They would go after their enemies. When they designated enemies, they would never quit. They went after those people. Let me give you an example. You remember that Disney actor, I forgot his name. He did that "He Will Not Divide Us" protest against Trump in New York City. He had like a little area, and he had a video, and it was called "He Will Not Divide Us," and people could like get in front of it and make their anti-Trump statements, right? So eventually there was violence there from Antifa, so the New York shut that down. So instead, he hung up a MAGA hat on a flagpole at an undisclosed location. He was just going to let it disintegrate in the weather, like supposedly the Trump administration would. So these again, it's the Asperger army, I call it, right? This Asperger army said, okay, he's one of our enemies. He was in favor of changing our video games and messing with our video games, which we like. So they said, okay. So they set up and watched this hat on this live video feed and watched the hat. And eventually one day there was a contrail pattern. And they matched that up with probable flight paths of aircraft flying over. And then somebody got satellite imagery and could get an approximate geographical location. And then they sent somebody with a pickup truck out honking the horn until they found the flagpole. They took the flag down and put a Trump flag up on the pole. Okay, so then he took it down and he put it up on another flagpole in another undisclosed location. They found it on top of a building in Scotland. They are relentless, right? You have to be relentless. You can't just if you look at what Jeff Morgan does. Jeff Morgan,
he's relentless.
He's relentless. He shows up to 4 or 5 events a month, sometimes 4 or 5 events a week. Okay, yeah. This guy shows up, and it's like Woody Allen said, right? What's 90% of success? Showing up.
Showing up. Yep.
Just show up, right? The other thing I think we got to do is we got to stop legitimating. Gamergate was very good at this. Stop legitimating bad politics, right? So we do this stuff where we go and testify to boards and we testify to committees and everything, and we do have to do that. We have to recognize, though, that we will participate in systems that are subverted against us. In many ways, our own participation legitimates them. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think we need to go one of 2 routes. You have the 1960s civil rights movement, which was very effective in achieving change against an entrenched propagandistic enemy. And they did that by aggressive disobedience. Mm-hmm. You don't want to serve black people in this lunch counter? Great. I'll have 6 black people sit at this lunch counter, and you have to get the cops to throw us out, and we'll come back here every single day. Every day we will come back. Mm-hmm. Relentlessly, we will come back. If necessary, I'll have 6 different people come back. Okay? Mm-hmm. I will not obey your stupid law. I'm not obeying that. Right? The other thing you can do is aggressive obedience. People don't think about that. Aggressive obedience. Sometimes the government wants you to do things and they have stupid laws. And, if you obey them aggressively, it undermines the government itself. Yeah. A classic example of this was the Cloward and Piven strategy, which bankrupted New York City. Yeah. New York passed all of these really fanciful welfare laws, which were well-intentioned, but they were fiscally unsound. So Cloward and Piven, professors at Columbia University, created a system to get every single New Yorker to apply for those benefits and bankrupted the city in 3 months. Yeah. That's aggressive compliance. Yeah. So I think we have to start doing that. I think we have to start saying, hey, I'm not obeying an unconstitutional court order, which gags me talking about my children. I'm not following an unconstitutional court order, which limits my legitimate parenting rights. And if the court wants to take that up on appeal, let's do that. We have to stop following unconstitutional laws and create a crisis.
So you talked about parenting rights, parental rights, and I just want to follow back with that real quickly here, because parental rights, do they even have any role in any place in family courts right now? Because it seems like, you talked earlier about the best interest of the child, and I don't know if we finished that conversation or not, but parental rights have been undermined to a large degree from everything that I've seen. And so I just want to get your comments upon that too, if you don't mind.
Well, okay. So I'll take this from the bottom up. So okay. When we look at what we call it, let's just take Texas. So Texas calls parental rights conservator rights. Mm-hmm. It's actually one of the only things in the family code that's actually done right. The conservator rights are well explained. They're clearly delineated, and they're not considered comprehensive. In other words, there might be parental rights that aren't actually mentioned in the statute, and the statute contemplates that. But the way the Texas conservator rights work is each conservator right is simply expressing the freedom of action necessary to perform your parenting duties. If you have a duty to educate your children, then you need a scope of action to make decisions and take action to educate your children. If you have a duty to feed your children and to clothe them, then you need the scope of action required. So in the Texas concept of conservative rights, parental rights, duties and rights are just the flip side of the same coin.
Right.
Unfortunately, in American law, since the founding, actually, it's not an artifact of the American founding, it's an unfortunate artifact of the entire Enlightenment movement. We have come up with this idea of rights which are totally divorced from duties. And this is nonsense, right? People talk about, well, you have a right to free speech. Well, a right is a sphere of action for you to act prudently in the exercise of a duty. Then what are your duties?
To speak against injustice and to use it to correct and to teach.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
People have a duty to oppose injustice, to oppose lies that could lead a democracy astray.
Right.
They have a duty to do these things. So, you have a Second Amendment right to carry a firearm, which comes along with duties as well, right? Why were we given, why does the Bill of Rights recognize the right to keep and bear arms? Because it was understood that every citizen has a duty to protect the homeland and to protect their own homes from criminal invasion. This is not, this is a duty that citizens have. And they're given a sphere of action in which they can prudently exercise their actions to achieve the duty. One of the things we can stop doing immediately is stop talking about rights that are divorced from duties. Right? One of the effective things that I've used at trial against judges is to not say that my parental rights have been violated, but to say I'm not able under your order to exercise my parental duties.
Yeah. No, that's very good.
It means exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay? But judges get it when you say, you've asked me to educate my child, but you have removed any sphere of action for me to exercise, to take action to exercise that duty.
Right.
I can't fulfill that duty.
Right.
Right.
We need to stop talking about rights as though they're divorced from duties.
I agree with
we could do.
Yeah. When you say that though too, it comes down to another issue, and in my mind it does anyway. So the duties of parents, who actually owns the children? Because if you look at what some of the things are in the Texas Family Code or other places, the way that supposedly the judges apply it, I could make the case that the state thinks that they own the children, not you.
Well, there's no question about that. I've described my own experience in family court as the judge raising my children and making me pay for it.
And that is immoral and unjust.
It's
and that's
immoral
what
and unjust.
we need to use our voices for.
That's right.
And our protests and everything.
So I like to make things simple for people listening. I like to give like clear guidance about what we're talking about. Let me just give you a clear example of something I've also said in court. I've said, Judge, you have one parent who wants to do, let's call it course of action A, that she believes is in the best interest of the child. You have another parent who wants to take course of action B, and he thinks that's in the best interest of the child. What can never happen is for the court to say, no, we're going to do course of action C, because I think that's better for the child. Courts can never do that.
Right.
Courts can either choose A or B or fashion a combination of A and B. But the parents get to decide what is in the best interest of the child. The court never, ever gets to decide that.
Right.
We need lawyers,
practice,
we need litigants who are willing to say that to judges.
Yeah.
Law does not empower you to determine what is in the best interest of my children. I am not here today asking you to do that, Judge.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am here today presenting what I believe is in the best interest of the child. Opposing counsel has presented what she believes is in the best interest of the child. You can choose between us or fashion a combination in equity. What you cannot do, Judge, is decide that you know better than the parents what's better for these children. You can't do that. We're fit parents, and the fit parent presumption applies to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to say things like that. We have to make those arguments. And more importantly, we have to actually act like it.
Yeah.
Asserting your rights is the only way to use them. And I'm sorry to say, but it is the duty of all fathers to assert their rights.
Yeah.
If you do not assert your rights, you cannot prudently exercise care over your children under any circumstances. So one of your most fundamental duties is to preserve your rights over your children. You can only do that by telling judges that they're not allowed to usurp your place. Don't let them.
Yeah. And that's what I've appreciated about you, Jeff, because I mean, when I first heard about you and stuff like that, it's been a couple of years now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years.
But I love the fact that you were public. The judge said this, and you're like, it's going out there regardless.
Yeah, these are public courts. We don't have secret trials in the United States, and for darn good reason.
Yeah.
Secret trials were used against the founders. The Star Chambers in the United Kingdom were used. Anytime you have secret trials, you have corruption, and you have an abuse of liberty. We have public trials here, and there's no reason people can't talk about what goes on in their trials. It's astonishing, the idea that people could visit a trial and see what is happening, but a litigant to the trial can't walk out and talk about it. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. Moreover, it is the public's right to observe this stuff. And I would go so far, I don't know what your thoughts are about this, but I would go so far as that if there's a public right to know how our courts are operating, and what you're talking about litigants being silenced at times like that, I think everything should always be broadcast. Videotape, audio tape. We should not have to rely on transcripts.
There's literally no excuse for not doing that.
Okay.
No excuse. The real reason we have court reporter records? There's two reasons we have court reporter records and courts with videotape.
Somebody makes a lot of money. That's one.
Number one reason is judges want to control what goes in that record. And
that is true.
They can tell that court reporter to take stuff out. I've had judges do.
Yeah.
Okay. The second thing is, and I've had court reporters collude. I've had court reporters say, "Oh, I just couldn't hear him, so I didn't put it in there." I've had that happen to me. The second thing is there's a pecuniary interest.
Mm-hmm.
I've already priced getting the court record from my last trial. It's $11,000 just to get the record. $11,000, right? So people are making a lot of money off of parents who need to get those records to go on appeal. Okay. Right. So there's two reasons. Judges want to control the record because they don't want you to make a record that you could appeal their decision on.
Right.
That's why they don't put it in the record. And then there's a pecuniary interest of people in the court who are making tons of money.
Yeah.
The one thing that comes to mind when talking about this saying, when you tear out a man's tongue, you're not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say. And I believe that's the reason they haven't wanted you to speak, Jeff. And it's kind of crazy. A second ago in the middle of the broadcast, I got completely kicked from it. Luckily, it kept going. I have to believe that people don't want this message getting out there, but you've been told not to talk. You've had all this going on. I want to make sure, in case I get kicked again, what is something about this case, Jeff? What are some of the things that you would like the world to know? And tell us about how they can support and get behind this. Anything that you want to say, you've got a platform. I just want to open it up for you because for so long they've tried to silence you. We want to hear what you got to say.
Well, first of all, I think the most important thing for everyone I'm a Christian, so I would just say pray, right? My son's names are James and Jude. I named them after the brothers of Jesus. Just pray for my sons. And I think prayer itself reforms the person who prays. When you pray for people in need, it reforms your own soul, your own heart. I think that's important. Secondly, reform your own actions. Okay? If you see injustice in your own community, get in the habit of standing up against it. Get over your fear that your reputation might be besmirched or you might be embarrassed. We all get embarrassed. You know what? Once you've been embarrassed for a while, you'll get used to it. It just won't. It'll be like that first dip in a swimming pool. It'll be cold, and then you're going to be fine, right? Take action. Have a habit of thinking and then taking action. Don't just think. Third thing, don't just think that because you go onto Facebook and you make some statements, you make some good arguments that you're doing anything. All right? That's only one tool. You need to show up in places where people need you, okay? Go help people as a court watcher. Confront elected officials. Confront judges at election time who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, okay? All of these actions that you take will reform you and purify you and will give you more and more courage, right? If you want to help me and my sons, the best place to go is the Save James Facebook page. Just go onto Facebook and search for Save James and like that page, get notified of updates on that page, because we don't just help ourselves. We help lots of people who need help. We point you out to stories that are important. We actually show the legal filings in cases, so you don't have to believe us. You can read it for yourself and see what the courts are doing. There's a donation link. I use that for legal fees and childcare expenses, like this $4,000 counseling regime and all this for my son. That helps. And I would say the donations are what really freaked out opposing counsel, because what it showed was there was real public support for my son and against what opposing counsel was proposing and what Ann Georgelas wanted for my son. But you know, the most important thing, I think, is change your attitude. These children are going to be abused if you don't stop it. And we're reaching a point, we're reaching the tipping point where you won't be able to stop it anymore.
Yeah.
You need to act in the next couple of years, are crucial years. And I'm going to tell you, once you act, you're going to find it's easier to act. And you're going to get a few wins under your belt. You can talk to Eric Carroll. Once you get a few wins under your belt, you start building something up and you start making it better, and it all starts falling into place. Cooperate with people in your community. Talk to them, right? That's one of the great things about social media. It's easy to talk to people. So talk to them. When you see people getting attacked online who are doing the right things, don't be silent. Stand up for those people. You know, we don't have a lot of fighters, frankly. I want to be honest with you. We don't have a lot of fighters. So you can do one of three things. You can fight. If you're not willing to fight, support the people that are fighting. Hit that give, send, go. Get on Facebook and support us on Save James. Or you can do nothing. Okay? I would submit that if you care about kids, you're not the kind of person who's going to do nothing. So support the fighters and help them.
I'm going to flash this up one more time, Jeff. This is the Save James where you guys can donate for this case. The goal is $100,000. They've raised $82,000, right at $83,000. But that might seem like a lot of money to some. Tell us, I know you mentioned earlier around $1 million, just how much money you've poured into this. I know Robert Garza, he's going up against the same law firm. He's already $600,000 in and 11 years of family court, 43 false CPS allegations, guys, and they just keep them rolling. Yeah. I mean, tell us about how much money you've spent and how long this has been going on, because this is ridiculous. Nobody should have to go to these links just to be a father.
Mine's been going on for 6 years, and it's consistently about $200,000 a year. All the money that you see that's been raised there has already been spent. I mean, it's all gone. It just gets chewed up. And listen, I'm going to be $1,000 May 29th at 1:30 p.m. just to go to court again. It costs me $20,000 every time I go to court.
Family court is the never-ending lawsuit, isn't it? It's not like other lawsuits. This
is a real problem with family courts too. The laws are really broken on this. In any other civil suit, when you get a judgment, you're done. That's it.
Right.
You need another cause of action in order to sue, right? Family court, they just let you sue every year. You just sue every year anytime you want.
Well, the government even encourages it with child support issues and modifications. So this is something that the government is our state government is actually involved in this stuff too. I mean, I think that there's fraud working at multiple levels.
Yes.
The law firms are just following the lead of the state.
Well, and it seems like everybody's in each other's back pockets. You got psychological evaluators, custody evaluators, the guardian ad litems. It's money after money after money after money. And if they think they can still keep money coming through, they're going to make sure that case keeps going. And they're all in each other's back pockets. I mean, would you guys agree with that? That's what it seems like to me. This whole thing is about money.
Yes. There's no questionably what it's about. It's basically county cronies in these courts, profiting off the desire of fathers and mothers to see their children.
Eric, I didn't know you were going to go back to that, so I had something down. I thought had it written off here, but as long as you mentioned that, let me bring it up. I was sitting in Jeff's trial, in October, I believe it was, of 2019. And it's at the guardian ad litem with an amicus attorney. I can't remember his name right offhand. The guy, there was your attorney, there was your wife's attorney, then there was the other guy. I forget his name. But anyway, they showed a clip of actually Anne interfering with Jeff's scheduled visitation according to the court. And he specifically took like a 0.1 second clip, and he tried to illustrate this to take this and to try to say, Jeff, you're a bad parent, and you guys have a problem here. And the reality was, I went up to him after that. I was shocked that he did that. So the next time I saw him, I brought him the 2503 interference with child custody. And I said, I had a question about what you did the other day. And I showed it to him, and you could just see like his face turned a different color. I didn't say anything. I thought, you scoundrel, you just, you are exploitive as well. He wanted to keep his money going because, Jeff has to call to say, hey, can I cut the kid's hair? Well, ching, ching, I don't know how much he made off of that. But this is an industry that is motivated by greed and by profit. And they get to say, we're doing this for the best interest of the children. We're being here because we need to be here. But you know what? If you need to be there, why don't you volunteer your time? Make this all community service. All these attorneys that are doing this, I think we ought to be looking at legislation to cap attorney fees. I think that attorneys are profiting off of a system that holds people hostage, and it's a never-ending litigation. When you have to spend $1.2 million or $500,000 or whatever to see your children, there's something completely wrong with this system, and we need to be looking at that. But then the other instance, like you mentioned, Eric, the different child custody evaluators and stuff like that. Yep. How many times they charge $50,000 for what?
Well, and, you just talk about the best interest of the child, Jeff. The best interest of the child is to take mom or dad's money that they've saved up to send them off to college and completely spend it on something just so that they can have access to their kids. It's about the best interest of their wallets, not the best interest of the child.
Yeah, there's no way that a court could adjudge that it was in a child's best interest for one parent to spend $50,000 on a custody evaluation.
Or both of them each separately.
There's just no way. Here, one of the arguments that I've made, and I'm going to continue to press this one because I think it gets to the root of it. In the law of land takings, eminent domain, there's a notion that the government can regulate your land to such a degree that you can't put it to productive use anymore.
Right.
Okay. And that occasionally happens, particularly with people that might have waterlands on their lands. So the government recognizes that it has effectively taken the land from the landowner and is required to pay them for it. Right.
I hear where you're going.
So when you take $50,000 from me to do a custody evaluation, you've taken those resources from the exercise of my parental rights and given them to a custody evaluator. That has diminished my ability to exercise my other parental rights, paying for the education of my children, clothing and feeding them, taking into account their education, paying for their medical care. All these things I can't do now because I gave $50,000 to a custody evaluator. There reaches a point at which the burdens the court places is an effective taking of the parental rights of the parents.
It is.
I've seen some of these cases where the parents have had 3 or 4 different psychological evaluations. 3 or 4. I've
had 2.
2. Exactly.
And it was interesting, Eric, that there was the psychologist or child psychology evaluator, whatever they're called. But I found out about this one online thing that they were having testimony, and I mentioned it to Jeff, or maybe I don't remember how it turned out, but I had seen what had happened in his case and some other stuff, and I got on and I testified. Now, granted, right before us, we had these two people were talking about what a wonderful job that they do. I mean, you would have thought these people were like the creme de la creme or something. I mean, they're patting each other on the back. So they're done, and then they asked me to testify, and I'm listening to everything. So I said my portion, and I named them by name and what I thought, and I had no idea that Jeff was the next person in line. And Jeff came up with a perfect follow-up right after me. So, I mean, you had all these child custody evaluators. What a wonderful job we're doing. We're here for the court. And then it was like bang and bang. We tried to, I don't know that they took them down or anything, because then what did they do? They passed laws. They passed guidelines to protect themselves. Jeff, maybe you can talk about this more, because you actually know more about this than I do. But, I'll let you talk about that.
So the custody evaluator, first of all, when you go to a custody evaluator, the first thing they have you sign is a notice that you know that there are no standards for custody evaluations. There are no legal or psychological standards of practice for doing custody evaluations. Literally, what the court is saying is, "Hey, man, just tell me what you think I should do here." That's literally all a custody evaluator is. Just somebody who's going to say what should be done.
You gave me some trappings so that it looks good.
Yeah. And
I can wrap up this
actually used for is 2 things. One, they're used to assign a fault in a no-fault divorce. The purpose of the custody evaluator, the court can't consider fault in the divorce, so it uses the custody evaluator to assign fault in the divorce. And 2, it provides an evidentiary basis to maximize Title IV-D reimbursements. That's literally all they're for.
It's a lie that supports the scam.
I'll give you a little trick that they use. So in every state, there's some period of time after which you can't introduce new evidence before you go to trial. In Texas, that's 10 days. Right? There's 30 days. There's a 30-day window. You have to get all evidence in with 30 days before trial. Okay? The custody evaluators always release their report inside the 30-day limit. And that prevents you from getting a second opinion to rebut their report. You can't submit one. Okay? That's why if everybody goes, why does it take them a year and a half to do a report? Well, they did the report. They did the report right after your last appointment. They're just waiting until the 30-day evidentiary window passes so you can't get a second opinion and contradict them. That's how corrupt these bastards are.
Well, I just flashed a video up for anybody that's curious of what goes on in a custody evaluator's mind. We actually found one that got caught on videotape. The father had a camera on his front porch, and the custody evaluator didn't know it, so the whole thing got recorded. He's on there talking about how the mom's a sex addict, how she alienates the kids, tries to block time with dad and everything. The crazy thing is, about after he did this, he went in court and went in favor of the mom. But if you ever wonder what goes on inside their heads, please go and check that out, guys. I put it down there. It's crazy. This dad paid all this money for this guy, and this is what happened. It's the amount of corruption that we've got inside a family court. Nothing surprises me anymore, but it's ridiculous. It really is.
this is why with the current counseling regime that I have, that I won't cooperate with these two counselors, because it's already clear they're doing corrupt stuff, right? They're not going to see my son when he's a boy with me. They're only going to see him when he's a girl with his mom. First of all, that means they can go into court and say, James never once presented as a boy to me. He always presented as a girl consistently for 9 months.
Because we forced him to come as a girl.
They can testify to things like that. That's why they're doing it, okay? So there's already corruption. They've already affirmed that he's a girl. They already used his fake girl's name, affirmed him as a girl without my consent, okay? That's corrupt and illicit. Once you realize that it's corrupt and illicit, why would you even follow the court order? Why would you even pay the money, right? Once you know the custody evaluator is gonna give you this lying evaluation, why would you even cooperate with it? Why? Why even do it? We have to start thinking like that. We have to start acting like that. We have to just say, right. Judge, I'm not cooperating with this because there's an illicit process going on. I would like to have 2 custody evaluators, one appointed by my wife and one appointed by me, and I would like the court to see adversarial evidence from both of us on what should be done with the children.
So, Jeff, my thought is this, though. Go
ahead.
But by talking about the custody evaluators, and I know what you're saying, but nevertheless, you're acceding some type of jurisdiction to the court in that matter. And I understand what's going on right now, but I still want to say, why do they even have jurisdiction in an issue of the family? It may not be a popular argument, but I still, the state has now said, we own your children. And in some areas, you can almost say it's discriminatory because it's based on marital status or potential marital status. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, those arguments just don't win. I mean,
no, I know they don't win, but I understand that.
I hate to point people. Look, you can be philosophically right.
Yeah.
And be put up against a wall and shot. Right?
No, but here's the idea.
All the anti-communists that were shot,
Right. So what would happen if? And I mean, look, there was something I did one time when I was in the military. There was a drill sergeant, somebody else's platoon. He was going to come and mess with our platoon. I happened to be the platoon leader at the time, and I was told by my drill sergeant, if he comes over and he does that, you do not pay attention. We are your drill sergeants. So I went around to bust everybody because I knew it was going to happen. And I said, do not do this. Do not obey him. Do not, and everybody listened to me. And I actually had to leave to grab something. And when I came back, there was yelling and screaming and everything else. But the entire platoon was not paying attention to him. It caused them to have a nervous breakdown, I think. I don't know. But I mean, at what point in time did we just say no? You can't get everybody to do it. And I understand that there are different reasons for doing it. But what would happen if the entire state just said...
I can tell you how. It's not complicated. If you just think about how human psychology works, right? You give people small wins saying no. They have small wins saying no.
Yep.
They get larger wins saying no. And eventually they'll say no to the big thing.
Yeah.
If you give them, if you tell them to say no to things that they're not going to win,
yeah.
Stop saying no.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
You have to give people wins.
Yeah.
Right? You can say no to gag orders because the anti-SLAPP statutes are on your side and you can win those cases. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can win the right to an adversarial presentation of a custody evaluator. Those are possible to win.
Yeah.
You can do these things. So you need to offer those small wins, and but this is how the left works. This is how the left got this transgender stuff.
Yeah,
they make a bunch of small wins.
Yeah,
and then they turn it into a giant legal precedent eventually.
Right.
Every court in the United States.
Right. So this is a different way. Maybe it's a small win and to some degree, but because of the whole COVID stuff and everything, we've had a lot of these meetings online, and what we have. And Eric, I know that we both have helped facilitate this a little bit a few times where, somebody will say, hey, can we get some people to watch? And all of a sudden, there was a judge that's like, there's like 26 people watching this hearing, what's going on? And he ended up recusing himself. Now, that may seem like nothing, But to me, that was a win.
It is a win. That's a great win.
It was, yeah.
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 And so
It
we
shows
have
everybody who was involved the power of court watching.
right. But we only did it once or twice. And I'm like, come on, we need to have some type of an organization that, we have redundancy in place. Not everybody can turn on their computer and walk away or whatever, or watch it or record it. I say record everything too. Even though they say do not record, I say record it. And but we have to have some way that we are organized together so that we can take these small wins, and that we are not looking, like you said, there's no leader here. Somehow it's happening. I got this transcript. I don't know how I got it. I got the court recording. I don't know how I got it. But we are just all firing, and we don't stop. We are relentless. Brandon Johnson said this the first time I met him. We must be relentless. What you just said, Jeff, be relentless. We never stop. And wear them out.
You have to be willing to disobey.
Yeah.
And it was the first time we had done something like that, Jeff. You had sent me the link. I showed up on YouTube. I kept saying, "This is Eric from Dad Talk. I'm watching you." And I said, it's crazy. I said, we're seeing some of the worst cases I've ever seen in this area down in Texas. I'm about to come investigate that. And I promise you, we're watching everything you're doing. And at the end of that case, I watched the judge say, I got to recuse myself from this. We got to get off of it. And I was like, it worked. It worked. Now, what if we had more advocates that weren't afraid and got on there? That's when we're doing this little tour across the country, going to the capitals. I'm prepared to go talk to our legislators and say, you're either for us or you're against us. And if you're for us, I'm going to tell people. If you're against us, we're going to tell people. And we got to make ourselves an issue. We are a main platform issue. Right. Just know we haven't organized good enough to make that happen, and that's about to go away. We are about to make it that way. But you got to go out there and not be afraid, guys. You are standing up for what I feel is the number one issue facing us in society. You've got that on your behalf. So go out there, be fearless, and show up to these things. Jeff, I'm sure you could use a few more hands down there in Texas to go and do some of this court watching. Sure. I'm going to tell you, they don't like it when that guy walks in the courthouse, because they know he's going to call it out for what it is, and he's going to say something. And we need more Jeff Morgans. We need more Jeff Youngers, Melissa Isaacs. We need people like that, guys. And, kind of like what Jeff Younger was saying earlier on here, a lot of people get on Facebook, they post the memes, and they post awareness, and they think that's advocacy. I mean, not saying that awareness and doing that doesn't help to some degree, but guys, we got to get boots on the ground. That's when this thing is really going to happen. We can sit around telling stories around the campfire, or we can all grab a bucket and go get some water and say, we're going to put this thing out.
Yeah. And let me give you an example of just like stuff that I can't believe is not happening. So, I have a list of donors for Republicans on the committee that are considering the two bills that I've got going through the legislature right now. I've got two representatives supporting them, and I have two senators supporting two concomitant bills in the Senate in Texas. So I've got all these Republicans that are on this committee. There's 7 of them. And I've got their donor lists. And I'm going to visit their, most of these donors are banks and financial institutions. Some of them are large car dealerships and things like that.
Right.
I'm going to go visit with the owners of these places. And I'm going to say, here's the deal. It's real simple. If this representative votes against protecting children from transgender sexual mutilation, he votes against that. I already have a lease, and I show him the paperwork. I already have a lease on that billboard right across from your business, and I'm going to say that you paid to castrate little kids, and you're going to sue me for defamation, and I'm going to go into a Texas court and prove it.
We was just talking about this yesterday, wasn't we, Jeff? It was just talking about it. I showed him some of the contributions that are going on down there in Texas to block the shared parenting. And, I was prepared to go talk to the legislature and be like, it says right here, you got a $200,000 donation. And this is the person that's in our opposition. Would you like to tell me about this? Because I'd like to know, it's going to take that stance, guys.
You got to start going after donors. Not just, I have a representative. His name is Tan Parker. He's about as solid on this issue as a duck's feather in the wind. And I have money already put aside. He owns a bank right here where I live. We'll picket his bank, and we'll hand out flyers to every customer that goes into his bank saying that he supports the castration of little boys. I already have a Photoshop of him where I put his head on a rancher's body that's castrating a little cow. And I'm going to say that's Dan Parker. That's what he's doing to kids. And I say, do you want a bank here? I have cards from 3 financial representatives at opposing banks. You can go put your money there. They don't do this to kids. I mean, that's the stuff that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Okay? This whole thing about trying to convince legislators don't get convinced. Legislators get forced to do things.
So Jonathan Stickland said something that I thought was very good. He said, you make it so that legislators have to vote your way even when they don't want to. And that, he was talking about some of the things that he did that they were just mad as could be at Jonathan. Because, Jonathan, he had his winsome ways, right?
Well, he forced public votes when they didn't want public votes. And
exactly.
He violated the script and added amendments that they had to vote on, and they all had to vote for it, even though the establishment didn't want them to. So
right.
They hated him.
Right, they did. But then he said at one point, I was at a meeting with him not too long ago, and he said, what happened was this. They hated me. They could not stand that I did this. But one of the guys who absolutely detested me and hated me voted for what I was doing. And now he's actually running on that platform in a sense. And he's actually behind it because he saw it was popular with the people. So right. You make the legislators act in a way that makes them popular with the people. I mean,
you're right. We should stop.
Money and votes.
We must. Okay, remember I told you about this mindset thing?
Mm-hmm.
We have to stop thinking about persuasion.
Yeah.
We're not going to persuade elected officials. If we were going to be able to persuade elected officials, we would have in the last 30 years. Okay.
There you go. I like that.
We can persuade some, but you're right.
Very true. It's very true.
We have to coerce them. What are the means of coercion? Is a question you should be at. Not the means of persuasion. What are the means of coercion?
Yeah.
Right.
Taking away their damn donor money is one of them.
Right.
Taking away their votes in their district is another one. Besmirching their reputations, which they care a lot about. Besmirching their reputations with irony, ridicule, memes. They don't like that stuff, right? You got to find the means to coerce these people. They're not persuadable.
Yeah, when Garth Brooks wrote that song, I've got friends in low places, sometimes we have to have those friends in a sense. Yeah. I mean, I think that there are certain people that have to walk in a certain way and remain untouched. And we have each one of us do things a little bit differently, but we do know people that, the enforcer, so to speak. It's like, well, hockey, they used to have that one big defensive guy that made sure that everybody kind of played fair. And if people didn't play fair, you found out that the enforcer came and he made sure that next time you would play fair. And you decided after meeting the enforcer, it's not worth playing dirty anymore.
What it comes down to is you telling the truth. That's what amazes me about this. This is so easy. All you have to do is tell the truth about what people are doing that they don't want other people to know.
Right.
That's it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. That is it.
More than that. Now you might tell it with a billboard with superimposing a legislator's head on a rancher castrating a bull. You might tell that story by just passing out on an email list to all the Republican clubs or Democrat clubs or Libertarian clubs about what this person is doing. There's lots of ways to get the truth out there. There's never been more ways.
Yeah. So, personally, Jeff, this is the way that I've tried to do it. Is that I try to keep it narrow first before threatening to go bigger. And I think you probably agree with that too, because at the end, you want to have an ally, even though he may hate you, you still want that person to be your ally. So, sometimes it's the threat itself that is enough. Maybe he will do it. I don't know. This guy just seems a little bit crazy enough. And
shared parenting, like in Texas, has come up. I don't know.
I know. I know.
For last 5 sessions. That's
right. And here's what gets me
same
about
people
the
that gets it thrown away.
Yeah, and what we need to be doing too is attacking the lobbyists. The lobbyists act as if they are the experts and that they're there to offer their opinions, their advice, and everything else. And we need to be asking our legislators
ourselves, what are the means of coercion?
Yeah, exactly.
What are the means of coercion against those lobbyists?
Yeah. Well, I've got my own ideas. I won't discuss them right now here, but
let's not give all the juicy details away now.
Yeah, I've got some in.
Sizzle in that steak.
Yeah, if you scour the internet enough, sometimes you find things that
That's right. That's right. Followthemoney.org, guys. Anybody that you want to find out, put their name in and you'll see where the contributions are going to, which is what I was showing, Jeff the other day. I mean, they're making big contributions, especially in the state of Texas, to make sure that shared parenting doesn't go through. Big contributions.
The law firm that I'm facing, that David Garza is facing, I believe is the largest contributor to judicial campaigns in the state of Texas.
Right. And that's, exactly. That is a huge, well, I don't know if they are or not, but I mean, I know what you're saying. And that is a huge issue.
I use it against them all the time, though. You can turn these things against them,
Yeah.
I get pressured by them in court, and I just say, hold on. I'm getting a little nervous. I mean, I'm facing the most powerful law firm in the state of Texas that gives all these donations to judges. Give me a minute to get my head together to answer your question.
They love it.
Oh yeah,
I know.
It's a weakness as well as an advantage.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I have enjoyed this broadcast. I really have. I think we could probably go on all night about it, but I'm sure we're going to have you back on, Jeff. And if you ever need any of our help, man, let us know. We'll come stand outside the courthouse, do whatever we got to do. There's a lot of importance that goes on this case that goes beyond James. It goes beyond Jeff Younger. It goes beyond any of us. Could you tell us some of the implications that if we don't make sure that we really focus on what's going on with this case, some of the implications that could come back to haunt people beyond what we're seeing in this particular case?
The danger here, and I think this is why the transgender community has seized on my case more than other cases. My son doesn't present consistently as a girl, okay? He presents as a girl with his mom, and he presents as a boy with me. And I think the calculation they've made is if I can get this boy, I can get any boy. Okay? I can get any boy. If you establish as a precedent in U.S. law in any state, because once it's in a state, it becomes persuasive precedent in other states. You get that in any state, that there's a precedent that a court can, against the consent of both parents, genitally mutilate the child. You are on this slippery slope to where they'll do it without either parent's consent.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's already happening in Canada, and it's starting to happen in Utah right now. That's the danger you're facing.
And that's right, because they don't just take it all away at once. It's one little step at a time until all of your rights, all of your liberties are just completely stripped of you guys.
That's right.
So we got to stand up. We got to be not afraid to get out there and do stuff. Like I said, I've had people that told me, stay away from this case, stay away from this case. Hell no, I'm not staying away from this case. There is a child that this is being done to. This is one of the most severe forms of abuse that I've heard of. I mean, it really is. We talk about parental alienation and how that's child abuse. I can't even believe that there would be support behind something such as this. It ticks me off so bad. And I'm sorry, Jeff, that you've had to go through this. I'm sorry that it kind of got caught in the middle of politics. There's many different things you've had to fight out with this. But one thing I got to say for certain is it makes me proud to see a father like you that fights for what he believes in. And even though they told you to shut up, that made you get louder.
We're just fathers, man.
That's it.
We love our sons, we love our daughters, and there just isn't any other course of action to take.
Yeah.
It's our duty.
Yeah.
And if you're not in this position, you can bet that one day you will be.
Jeff, something that you said earlier that, there's a lot of things I never wanted to be involved in, never, that I thought I felt like, God, how come I have to speak up? But I have to speak up. And, the times that you're shaking in your boots, or that you're like, how am I going to do this? But if you start to do it once, you do it twice, all of a sudden you're like, okay, it becomes a whole lot easier.
It's not that bad.
Yeah. If you stick yourself out there the first time, and then you're like, okay, now I've got the reputation, whatever.
The worst thing they can ever do to you is say something mean to you. And I think most people can handle that.
Yeah. 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 Or, I mean, listen, and you look at yourself. I mean, I look the same thing, you talk about being a man of faith and everything. So what if they do, if your house is in order, if you're, so they're going to do that? Really? They're going to try to do that against me? Because, I mean, I've had people that tell me, hey, you need to watch yourself. They're going to do this, they're going to do that. And I thought at the beginning, this sounds kind of crazy or something. But I thought, you know what? After hearing some of these things and seeing some of the stories, I am not saying 100% that nothing like that could ever happen. But, the scripture talks about people that, even though being dead, they still speak, their faith still speaks, their voice still speaks and stuff like that. And we want to make sure that our testimony, our voice, our stand still speaks throughout the generations. What you do today is going to be the foundation for somebody else tomorrow. And the reason that we can do what we've done today to whatever it is because other people went before us. And, we cannot let that chain get broken with us. And for me, as I've said many times, I look at to say, what happens if one day when I see my grandchildren, if my grandchildren say to me, Grandpa, did you know that this could happen? And I said, yes. And they said, oh, Grandpa, did you do anything about it? Did you try? And if I said no, I could not live with myself. So, I mean, to me, it's that responsibility to say, I want to see this evil system, this wicked, immoral, unjust system that abuses kids, abuses families, mothers, fathers, grandparents, uncles, aunts, brothers and sisters, whatever it may be. This is a wicked evil. It's pernicious. It's hideous. It's worse than the cartel. When I talk about the cartel and the mafia, I almost offer apologies to them. That's how evil the system is. And yet you have these people that wear their black robes, or that they have their briefcase and they try to defend it. They try to defend the injustices that take place on a daily basis. We cannot stop.
That's
and right. We must stand. We must win, because it's like, who else do they go to if not us?
Our children's future depends on it, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be your children. It can be their children. This is something that if we don't stop it, it's going to have an effect on many, many different people and their families, and they profit off the destruction of families. We've seen it. It's what happens. And I think it's very important for any of the advocates that are going to be birthed out of this conversation to know, just because you're standing for what's right doesn't mean you're not going to face opposition, doesn't mean that you're not going. There's going to be a lot of people that don't like you for speaking up. You just got to learn to put those blinders on and say, look, I don't care what they say. I'm going to go fight for what's right. And I would say, Jeff, they didn't just go after you because you were trying to stand up for your son. They tried to make a whole smear campaign on you.
Sure did. There was an entire propaganda campaign launched against me. Big whoop. I always tell people, whatever bad thing you've heard, it's worse. And if you want to come find out all the details, come talk to me. I'll buy you a beer and you can listen. I don't really care. They can say anything they want about me. I've used all kinds of rhetorical techniques against them. The best way to counter their stuff is just say, oh, no, whatever they're saying, it's worse. It's way worse. Just agree and amplify with these fools, right? But, as we go out, I talked about attitude, and as we go out as broadcast, get some friends on the phone, get some friends on Facebook, go chat with some of your buddies, and let's talk some treason against this awful family court system. Let's talk some treason.
Absolutely.
Bring it down.
Yeah.
So real quick, I know this is a real a big passion for both of you. This would be the last thing that we touch on, but somebody had wrote in here, and I'd like to know too, as the son of a pastor, both of my granddads was pastors. I come from a family of ministry. Loanne Russian said, why aren't our religious leaders speaking up on this?
It's a great question.
Yes, it is.
Well, go ahead, Jeff.
I know Morgan, he's ready to go at this one.
Go, Morgan.
Yeah. Yeah. I have been so disappointed in the religious leaders that have lacked a backbone, have lacked moral clarity, have become so woke in a sense, that have just decided that they are going to, that they no longer look at, from my perspective, our religious leaders compromise with the issue of no fault divorce, and it's been going worse and worse and worse since then. And then we have to try to make ourselves relevant. So we have to try to change our message somehow. It's completely wrong. The religious leaders, the denominations have tried to, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a form of outreach or something, but they have lost the clarity. They've lost moral clarity. They've lost scriptural clarity. It's like they don't read the Bible. It's like somebody said the other night, don't be surprised when the church leaders, don't talk about the sin of homosexuality or something like that, for example, because they no longer talk about sin, period. I mean, you go to church to get a moral speech, to get an uplifting speech. Well, you know what? It used to be they thundered against sin, because you cannot be great if you are allowing evil to tolerate and to continue to grow, tolerating evil and allowing it to sabotage and undermine everything that you're doing. And our church leaders have not seen, when you cause a destruction of the family, you are weakening the church. And there are some of these religious leaders that think, we've got to be in there, we've got to strengthen the kids that have been destroyed. Well, you know what? It was Frederick Douglass who said, what is easier and what's better? Is it better to build strong children or to repair broken men? You should be building strong children. And one of the best ways you do to build strong children is to protect the family. And when you protect the family the way that you should, I've mentioned no fault divorce. That was a great religious compromise. Every religious liberty at this point is on the line due to the issue of no fault divorce. That's my perspective. Because marriage is, and Jeff can maybe speak about this if he wants to, marriage is a religious sacrament to very many people. Why is the church even interfering in an ordinance or a sacrament of the church? And we do not grasp that. So I go on about this all the time.
Yeah. But no, and I love the passion, man. But would you say it's fair to say, much like the family courts have gotten blinded by money, I think that's happened with a lot of our churches as well, especially when it comes to this issue.
There are popularity and financial reasons, indeed, that, it's not always popular to preach the gospel, but that's perhaps why Jesus said, talking about the two different gates, the gate that goes to destruction is wide, the way is broad, but the way in the gate that's leading to life is narrow. And sometimes preaching holiness and preaching against sin is not the most popular message, but it is the most needful message. And we are lying to our people. We are lying to each other if we think that by not telling the truth about evil and wickedness, and then but because only when you know that can you show the right way and the proper way. And we're leading an entire generation astray. I don't know why the church is not speaking about this issue.
The sad part is they could have so much influence.
Yeah.
So much influence on these issues. We go every Sunday to pray to God the Father, but when it comes to the Father in the home, they are absent. They don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So first of all, there's a great book you can get called Why Men Don't Like Going to Church, or Why Men Don't Go to Church. Okay.
Yeah.
And he has this exercise in there where he looks at adjectives that are commonly used, for example, to describe Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the adjectives, they're the list of adjectives you would normally use to describe a woman. And that's how he's talked about. That's how Jesus is talked about. Jesus was a badass. Jesus confronted some of the most powerful people on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we use these weird emasculated adjectives about him, talk about him in these weird passive ways. That's the first thing. And I'm going to give an experience from my church, right? So I'm an Orthodox Christian. I was at a Greek Orthodox church, St. John the Baptist Greek Orthodox Church in Euless, Texas. The rich donors of the church on the church council sided with my ex to transition my son. Straight up. My priest did not excommunicate them. He did not speak against them. He allowed them to they even got to a point where they hired a police officer to follow me around at church in an attempt to drive me away from the church to stop coming. My priest never did anything about it. His name is Father Vasile, and he never did anything about it. On occasion, he spoke up for me, but he allowed these people to run roughshod over the doctrines and teachings of the church.
Yeah.
Finally, the bishop required him to teach 3 sermons, one against transgenderism, one against gay marriage and communing gay people, and one against abortion. And it caused a near riot in the church when he did it. And he's never preached a subsequent sermon on it. So we got real problems in the churches, and I think it might even be worse, guys. I'm thinking at this point that this problem may have originated in the churches. That the weakness and the kind of almost postmodern approach to thinking about theological issues may have been the basis for this change in American society, because Americans are church-going people, and what happens in their churches, they tend to follow. So the question then is, what do we do about it? Well, it's very simple. If everybody is pissed off because their churches aren't standing up and aren't teaching the true doctrine, we'll go start a church. Go start a community church. They don't pay taxes. They're easy to start. Go crank up a church and start teaching the right way and teach people the right way. How about protesting at the churches that are bad, right? How about doing that? Use that billboard strategy. Use that meme strategy. How about that? The same. If the churches aren't on our side, they're our enemy.
Right.
And we didn't treat them like that. We've been treating them with kid gloves. We stop doing that.
And Jeff, what you talked about, the problems originating in the church, I've been listening to a couple of these audio books, Contemporary Theology by Kirk McGregor. And it's very interesting because some of the, if you look at the past, a lot of the knowledge was preserved by the church. But then you have people that, you start getting into whether you get into the Protestant Reformation or whatever it may be. But then as things start to progress more and more and more, there are people that try to think, and some of the people started to think, how do we adapt Christianity to philosophy versus how do we bring philosophy into captivity in a sense to Christian orthodoxy, but how do we change Christian orthodoxy so that it melds better with the current philosophy that we believe in? And then, there's ramifications to some of these things.
There are.
The teachings of the church have been around for, a long, long time, thousands of years. And to make them relevant, we have to change, in a sense, in their mind, we have to change the teachings to make them relevant to culture. Well, culture should be relevant, should be underneath the submission of the church itself.
Yeah,
does it make sense what I'm saying? That, the philosophy
I remember
is
talking
causing some problems.
We need to make the teachings of the church relevant to this new crop of young people. And I'm like, no, we don't.
I'm sorry. I lost the sound here for a moment. I thought I was okay. Go ahead.
I said I've had churchmen say we need to make the teachings of the church relevant to this new generation of young people. I'm like, no, we don't.
Right. Absolutely.
We elevate the intellectual and moral capacity of the young to conform to the church teachings.
Right. And that's what I was trying to say. If it wasn't not clear.
Yeah, they have to become relevant. I'm just amplifying what you're saying.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
We need to elevate youth to conform to the church, not the other way around. Unfortunately, that's not happened. And what happened? It was, what was it called? The New Church Movement, or sometimes called the Vineyard Church Movement. The idea was to apply business marketing principles to the running of churches, and that's what they did.
Yeah. There's a number of things like that.
All right, guys, I'm going to flash this up one more time. This is the website. I put the link down in the comments. Please make sure to go and donate to this. I mean, That might look like a lot, but I'm telling you, it's little, next to nothing when it starts going to these family court battles. And I'm sure that you're going to be going a few more times, Jeff. We know it's been going on for a while. Before we get out of here, though, I just want to ask you one more time if there's anything that you'd like to leave everybody with, something that you can leave to these advocates that are listening right now. Tell them whatever you want. Jeff, I'm going to let you close this out.
We always say, save James, saves thousands of children. James is the tip of the spear. It's the test case. We have to win it for all the other kids. Stay up to date with what's going on with this issue at the Save James page on Facebook. Just go to Facebook and search for Save James. It's a page with 50,000 followers. It's really got a couple 100,000 followers. They push us down. You can follow all kinds of news on this issue and follow it. The admins just do a great job there. You can also click to donate there. But mostly, adopt the attitude that when you're done here, you're going to get together with some people and you're going to talk some treason against this corrupt system.
That's it. All right, brother. Thank you for coming on, and we're right there with you. Everybody, go follow that page. Make sure you get involved, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are fighting for the rights of parents worldwide. If you want to help support our podcast and for us to continue this mission, please join us at patreon.com/DadTalkToday. You will find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, CloutHub, Parler, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, the podcast app, Google, Apple Podcasts. We're a little bit of everywhere. And guys, every time you like and subscribe, you help us continue this mission. Thank you, and we will see you